In this section, we are going to talk about purchase requisitions. In short, they are called PREQs or PREQ. To understand purchase requisitions, let's understand what happens in the coffee shop on a daily basis. So we've got our coffee shop, Chicago one, and in the coffee shop, different activities are happening, right? For example, the bakers are baking pastry, cakes, muffins, so on and so forth. The barista is brewing coffee, and the manager is in charge of managing the stores. The bakers work with flour, sugar, so on and so forth. The barista works with coffee, and the manager uses stationery, printers, cartridges, so on and so forth. Now, these people of all know the requirements of, for example, how much flour is required, how much sugar is required, how much coffee is required on a daily basis. They would know how much is required next week, they would know how much is required next month, but it's all in their mind, right? They're not on paper, it's all in their mind. So the way to formally document these requirements is called a purchase requisition. How do we document the requirements? These are documented internally in SAP or the system using what is called as purchase requisition or PREQ. So what is a PREQ? A PREQ is a way to formally document the requirement for goods or services. So it's a tool to formally document requirements. And another characteristic is it's an internal document, meaning it's not a document that goes out to the vendor. For example, if the baker says that he requires 100 kilos of flour next week and records it in a PREQ, it's not something that goes out to the vendor. It's an internal document that needs to be further acted upon to let that actual purchase order go to the vendor. So these documents are definitely indicative, meaning they only indicate a requirement. That does not mean that requirement is true. The baker might not know that there is a 100 kilo bag of flour lying in another plant which can be transferred to this plant. He's doing his job. He doesn't know what's happening in terms of all the goods that are lying across the company. He just knows that next week or next day he requires 100 kilos of flour. That's it. If he wants to document it, he can document it as a purchase requisition. Later, somebody in the purchasing department consolidates these and then takes action that's more actionable, meaning does a purchase order need to be sent, or maybe there is some stock residing in another plant. Maybe a stock transfer order needs to be created between Chicago plant and San Francisco plant. That's the duty of the purchasing manager. So like I said, purchase requisition is a formal tool to document the requirements, and it's a completely internal document, meaning it does not leave the company. Like a purchase order which goes out of the company into the vendor's location and the vendor supplies the goods, right? That's an external document. When I mean an internal document, it's only used within the company. It doesn't go out of the company. And number 3 is it's indicative. It's indicative of what? It's indicative of a requirement. Now that requirement could be met with other means without actually creating a PO. We don't know that. Or the indicative requirement could be consolidated to create a much bigger PO for reasons that we know, right? Bigger volumes give better prices, right? So finally, this PREC can eventually be converted into a purchase order or many other documents that go out to the vendor and eventually is acted upon. So that's a purchase requisition. Now, in the next chapter, we are going to create a purchase requisition and see how it can be converted to a purchase order.